Hello. Good evening. Welcome to Maker's Demo Day. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Owen and I'm a technical coach here at Makers. We're here today to showcase the incredible final projects developed by our March cohort. I'll introduce the cohort and each team will present what they've been working on only since Tuesday last week. Afterwards, please stick around for a Q&A session with Haley, who's our events manager, and Rachel, our course manager, and me, I'll stay. Many of you will already know that Makers Academy is a 12-week coding bootcamp. It's an intensive learning experience, and over the course of their time here, many developers go from knowing some coding basics to being able to build a web application from scratch. We do believe that anyone can learn to code. Just a few months ago, the developers you're going to see tonight were enjoying their first week here, getting to grips with TDD and Ruby classes. And now they can build and deploy whole projects to create the products they'd like to use, and that I'd like to use as well. I've had the honor of working with the March cohort for 4 of their 12 weeks of bootcamp. I'm going to address the cohort directly when I say this. You should all be extremely proud of what you've achieved. You started the full-time course just 12 weeks ago, and look where you are now. I know that it's been no easy feat. I do mean it when I say it was an honor and a joy to work with you. There's a lot of things that I appreciated about you, but it includes the energy and positivity you brought each day, the enthusiasm with which you took on new challenges week after week, and specifically the support you offered one another throughout. It's been really inspiring to see how you've thrived, especially in such challenging personal times, and I'm really excited to see where you go next. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce the first team to present this evening, and that is Team Whatstack. I've seen them do some very intense learning over the last 2 weeks, and I can say with certainty that I would absolutely love to use their product. So thank you, and over to you.
Hello, everyone. We are Ed, Faye, Phil, Steven, and I'm Angelica, and we are Team Whatstack. And today we're going to show you our final project for Makers. For this project, we're given the brief developer tools, which is quite broad in scope. So to help us narrow it down, we picked the project with an ideation session. After this session, we decided that we would like to build an instant messaging tool to facilitate knowledge building, especially amongst new developers. And we wanted to focus on creating a space that will be more welcoming than other more established communities, such as Stack Overflow, when sometimes answers to this question as a new developer can come with some helpful put downs. We have some examples of those in this slide over here. So yes, with that idea in mind, we set up to create Whatstack. I'm going to pass over to my friend Faye now.
Okay, so to decide what technologies we were going to use to build Whatstack, we wanted to find a balance between what was exciting and fun to learn and what would make us employable as engineers. So we settled on the MERN stack, which is a very common stack to use and allowed us to build an application fully in JavaScript for the first time on the course. MERN is made up of 4 technologies: Node, which is our back-end environment, and inside that we have Express, which is our server, allowing the front and the back ends to be able to communicate with each other. Our database is made from MongoDB, and it allows us to store our list of rooms and our chat history. And then in the front end, we have React, which allows Whatstack to be a single-page application that's both fast and responsive. For testing, we use Jest as our main testing framework, which allowed us to test both the front and the back end. And we also use the React testing library to test individual components of the front end. The biggest technology that we all needed to learn was sockets. Sockets allow for an always-on connection, meaning that users from around the world can access the site at the same time and send and receive messages in real time without having to refresh their browser. It may seem like a very simple stack, as it's very commonly used, but it was new to all of us. Throughout the course, we've all had the opportunity to learn JavaScript, and some of us had used React and some of us had used Node, but none of us had used sockets before and none of us had used MongoDB. So it was a big challenge and it was far outside the syllabus of Makers. Sockets in particular were a really big challenge and were a really steep learning curve. So to talk about that in more detail, I'll give you Stephen.
Thanks very much. Yes, as previously mentioned, being sockets were a very large portion of our project, and the fact that none of us had used them before, it was quite a challenge to get over. So essentially with sockets, you have two clients that you want to communicate to each other. So, for example, you send a message from your browser, your friend receives it, sorry. And it was a really tricky process because implementing a socket in one client is quite easy, but getting the two talking to each other is a little bit tricky. So we've went through 3 different stages of testing these sockets to ensure that they actually worked. The first stage was basically there's hardly any resources out there. We've tried doing it, it's really tricky. And we thought we overcome this in the second stage. And unfortunately, it seemed that we hadn't, because even though the tests were passing, they weren't testing the sockets correctly. But finally, thanks to Phil, we actually managed to get these sockets fully tested. So we can actually test to verify that the information is being passed successfully. The next thing I want to talk about is security of our website. We had a slight issue where the information coming from the user's GitHub account was actually exposed, and obviously that's a big security flaw. So the second we saw that, we passed it into what you call a cookie. So this is like a little parcel that gets passed around into the back end of the application, and that way we keep it safe and secure and all happy. So I'm going to pass you over to Phil now, who's going to talk a little bit about our process.
Hi, yes, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the non-technical aspects of the project, focusing on communication. Good communication was at the heart of our success as a group. We started the project by defining a team charter, which was an agreed set of expectations and responsibilities for ourselves and each other. This really helped create a supportive environment where everyone's voices could be heard. We also held regular meetings at the beginning and ends of every day, so that everyone was aware of individual and group successes, challenges, and issues. This approach prevented the majority of problems before they even occurred. For example, we avoided situations where people were blocked or held up by others' work, and we were able to get group consensus on almost all issues that were discussed. One of the few problems occurred relatively early in the project, when we realized that our vision of what WhatStack was actually going to do wasn't defined clearly enough. However, even this was easily remedied with a group meeting when we looked at the existing functionality ideas we'd brainstormed at the start of the project and decided on a core set of features to focus on. So now I'm going to pass you over to Ed, who's going to walk you through a recorded demo of WhatStack. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. So I'm just going to go into the video now. And here you are. We can see that we're at WhatStack, and we only really have one option to join, and that's via GitHub. For those of you who aren't familiar, GitHub is a site that developers use to store and share their code. So if you're a developer, it's likely that you're going to have a GitHub account. So here on GitHub, you can see that we've got our little WhatStack logo there. And once I've finished signing in, it's going to take us back to WhatStack. So I'm just going to do that now. And we're going to be back at WhatStack. Here we are, back at WhatStack, where you can see I'm greeted by my GitHub username. This is important because it allows us to make use of the GitHub API to pull bits of profile information that we can make use of all across WhatStack. So I'm just going to go into one of these rooms. It looks like, how do I get a job at WhatStack? That's very relevant, so let's have a look in there. So immediately you can see the value that we've been able to get from these GitHub usernames by pulling the profile pictures of GitHub accounts. So that'll be next to every comment that a user makes, just a little picture to identify them. And so that's what I really want to show. I'm going to go back to rooms. The real reason that I've come to WhatStack today is because I have a problem. I need to check to see if an array contains a specific element and I'm blocked. I can see I've got this chat open for that. So I'm going to click in there, and you can see we've got these 2 code blocks. One is written in Ruby and the other is written in JavaScript. And the highlighting should reflect that. Unfortunately, I haven't had any luck with my question here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to send a message saying, maybe I should open a new chat room so we can focus on the JavaScript side of things here. So I'm just going to send that message. And you can see as I'm typing it out, it goes over the line and I'm able to resize the text box to see everything that I'm typing. So I'm just going to click post there, and hopefully we've got a couple of other people in the chat who can reply to that. And there you are, you see the messages coming in instantly. So now that they're willing to help, I'm just going to say thanks, and I'm going to go back to the room page. So here I am back in rooms, and I'm going to make a new chat room, and it's as simple as just typing into this box here. So what I'm going to do is type almost exactly the same message, but I'm just going to make it very clear that this is the JavaScript focus chat. So the first thing that I want to do is paste in that code block that you saw in the other chat. If you're familiar with Markdown, then the process should be very similar. We start with 3 backticks and we end with 3 backticks. The main difference here is you see that I've got that JavaScript there. That's how we're specifying what language the code block should be highlighted in. So you could write in Ruby, you could write in Fortran, you've got 185 different options to choose from there. So I'm just going to paste in that code block now. And once I've done that, you should be able to see it pop up on the page. So let's paste that, and there we are. You can see it's immediately rendered as a code block, and it's highlighted to reflect the fact it's JavaScript. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to type a couple more messages, and we can see as those responses come in. Let's see. Yeah, there we are, real-time messages. So that's pretty much all that we wanted to show for this demonstration. So thank you very much for listening to our presentation. And if you'd like, feel free to join the conversation at whatstack.herokuapp.com.
Incredible. Thank you so much, everyone. That's amazing. I would clap if it wasn't really awkward for one person to be clapping, but I'll clap anyway because well done. Thank you so much. This idea that you implemented particularly resonated with me because I avoided Stack Overflow for so many years as a junior dev because I was afraid of it. Because for any developers listening, sometimes it can feel a little tense in there. So I just love that this idea kind of took that classic March cohort supportiveness and like friendliness, and you took it into a really tangible idea to help developers. So I love it, and I would love to use it. I also really admire the work that you put into learning and testing sockets, because I know that that was not an easy thing for you to do, and your commitment to finding out how to test it as well was truly inspiring, almost terrifying, but it was great, and you really did it. So I hope you're all really proud of yourselves. Thanks so much. I'm super excited to see what you do next. Cool. On to our second presentation of the afternoon. So this is Team Mission Control. I can't just say that I want to use the product that they've developed over the last 2 weeks, because I know that I need to use the product they've developed over the last 2 weeks. They've developed a tool, like our other team, that will help developers of any level of experience to improve their skills. So I'm going to pass over to you to show us what you did.
Okay, welcome to Mission Control. I'll start by introducing the team. So starting in the top left and going clockwise, we have Harry. I'm Alex, Graham, Gina, Tom, and Alexa. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the process of how we got to our final product, and then we will move on and show you the finished article. So over to Gina.
Our mission and Mission Control is to create a product to help developers on their coding journey. VS Code is a text editor that many developers use. It comes with a plethora of keyboard shortcuts, which are very useful as they enable you to code quicker and more efficiently. For example, if you want to go to the start of a line of code, you simply press the finish and left arrow key, rather than pressing the left arrow key multiple times. The problem is keyboard shortcuts are hard to remember, as we found during our time at Makers. There are 2 main ways of learning the shortcuts. One is while you're coding, but this interrupts your flow because you're so busy concentrating on solving complex coding problems. Another is by studying shortcuts through rote learning. However, this is disengaging and boring. So how can we solve this problem of learning? The solution: a shortcut training game.
So how did we start? So we first talked about our values. Before we began the project, we discussed as a group what our ideal team was, as well as our nightmare one. And this allowed light to be shed on the values we shared and wanted present in the project. One of our values was learning over getting it done. Having picked a tech stack only some of us were familiar with provided an initial barrier to getting stuck in with the code. So we took some time to split into groups and do some learning before taking on the challenge. Kindness. We don't dismiss each other's ideas, and at the end of the day, we do appreciations, which is something where You appreciate your partner for something they've been doing well that week or well that day, or just something you appreciate about them in general. And openness. Full discretion was advised in our project, and this was to create an environment where feedback could be given honestly, and any issue anyone was facing was shared with the group so that we could understand their situation and help push them through the day. And now over to Alex to talk about our processes.
So we used agile methodologies. These are an iterative approach to building software that allows you to work collaboratively and allows you to divide the work into smaller parts. These methods also really help us adhere to our team values. So throughout the 2 weeks, we divided the time up into what we call sprints. In our case, they were 2 days long, and it's basically where you take a small chunk of the work and then aim to finish it within those 2 days. There are a number of meetings each day. The first is the morning stand-up, where we start with a mood check-in. So how is everyone feeling? Does anyone have any problems? This is all part of our kindness value. We then talk about what we did yesterday and any impediments that might stand in the way today. We have an afternoon check-in where we discuss our progress. Again, are there any problems? We're constantly checking in to make sure we're on track. We have merge parties. These are where we integrate the code that we've been working into the larger code base. And this is part of our learning value. It allows everyone to see bits of the code that they've not been working on, so it makes sure that they understand what the code base is looking like right now. Everyone can make suggestions to improve the code at this point, but it's also part of celebrating the team's success. Finally, we have retrospectives. These are meetings at the end of the day. We discuss what's gone well, what can improve, and what are the next steps. This is all part of our openness goal, where we create a space that we can give honest feedback and really evaluate the work that we've done to improve the project going forward. So over to Alexa, who talk about the tech stack.
With learning being one of our priorities we identified at the start, we decided to choose technologies that were new to us. We had some experience in Node.js and more in JavaScript, and we decided to use the MERN tech stack, which allowed us to build on our JavaScript with new frameworks. The MERN stack includes MongoDB, which is a flexible database we use to store names and scores. Node is a server-side JavaScript environment. It sends information to and retrieves information from the database. Express is a Node web framework that enables communication between the browser and the server. We use these to create our backend and the API for our application. For our front end and user interface, we use React, which is a JavaScript library that allows your browser to be interactive and update without refreshing, and allowed us to create a single-page application. A challenge we faced with this stack was with the testing. And whilst we got very close to reverting our backend into Ruby on Rails, we persevered and remained with these technologies. When March 2020 cohort was shortlisting ideas, the top 3 included creating a tool for developers, using an API, and a theme of space. And we managed to include all 3 in our project. Now Harry's going to tell you all about the next part of our project.
Everything was going well until, Houston, we have a problem. Partway through the project, the need for a refactor was realized after we found that trying to add a new feature required a change to be made in distant parts of the code base. Also, as we were working with React, a relatively new technology for us, we ended up doing a lot of spiking, which is writing code without driving it through tests, resulting in poor test coverage. And testing is important to make sure that changes we make don't break code elsewhere, and we also want to make sure as much of our code is tested as possible. As a team, we discussed the current state of the program and how we could improve its design in line with object-oriented design principles. We successfully completed the refactor in a single 2-day sprint. This was certainly worth it, as it made adding further features much simpler. Before the refactor, we had a very tall and deeply nested structure. After, a much wider, shallower structure with much better test coverage. You can really see the difference. Much more red in the test before, and lots of green and 100% afterwards.
And this is what we ended up with after all our hard work. So here is the mission control homepage, and it's automatically detected what your operating system is, and it's adjusting the shortcuts accordingly depending on whether you're, say, on a Windows or a Mac. And in this section, you can spend some time just studying and learning the shortcuts before you start the game. Now you get shown something like show command palette. That would be Shift Command P on a Mac or Shift Control P, I believe, on a Windows. And you're getting points when you're getting it right, and you're losing points or getting less points if you're making mistakes. And you're getting even more points if you get a combo streak. So if you get many in a row, you're going to get extra points. Now, the game looks quite simple on the surface, but underneath the hood, there's a number of subtle complexities to the logic that you might not expect. One example of this is in JavaScript, you have something called event listeners. They listen on the client side in the browser for when the user presses a key. In our system, we had to customize our event listeners to work specifically according to the logic of the game. Now, the game is actually surprisingly quite hard. So when you give it a go, persevere if you don't know the shortcuts at first. It's supposed to be difficult. Now you're running out of time. You've got 5 seconds left. You want to get your last points in. You want to get your combo hit right at the end, plus 20. You're on the final page, the scoreboard. You got your score, total correct, incorrect, accuracy, speed. You can now add your name and submit the score and see where you come on the leaderboard. So now we're going to share with you the link to Mission Control. And I encourage any of you out there, especially developers, either new developers or even experienced devs, give the game a go. It can up-level your VS Code skills to the next level. So it's super addictive, fun game. Give it a shot. I just want to say thank you for listening. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to share this with you today. It's been an incredible journey at Makers Academy, growing as people and as developers. We're Mission Control. We're super passionate about code, helping developers to code. Thank you for listening. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, amazing work. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for dialing in from space. It's really appreciated. The connection was stellar. Amazing. It's settled in for me just how much I need to practice my developer shortcut skills when you let me play this game this week. I'm thankful I wasn't sharing my screen at the time because you couldn't see how badly I was doing. I'm on annual leave next week, but I'll be playing this game every single day to get my practice in so that when I come back to work, I'm more ready. But yeah, in all seriousness, well done, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. To both teams as well, the kind of like focus you chose to have on your code quality and refactoring at the start of this week was really amazing to see. It's like serious time pressure. So there's often like a desire to get as many features in as possible. But the fact that you took a 2-day sprint to just think about the code quality and testing and those really important things, I was just super impressed. So well done. Something I wanted to mention, I say a lot about how much I enjoyed working with your cohort, but there's like specific examples. So at Makers, we encourage peer group check-ins in which, if you're unfamiliar, small groups of developers come together in the mornings to check in with one another. They'll check in emotionally, discuss what's on their mind or what they're going to be working on that day. I popped into each of this cohort's peer group check-ins in their 6th week, and I was just blown away by the support that you were offering one another. You're really hyping each other up, and it felt like such a lovely way for you to start your days with like honesty, vulnerability, and just this like really intense desire to want to help each other out. So I mean, it was just like so lovely and inspirational to see. I was really pleased to hear you say today that some of you plan on continuing those peer group check-ins while you move into this next phase in your developer journey. Your support as well, it transferred to our next developers as well. It wasn't just in your cohort. I'm often having conversations with other devs at Makers, and they'll mention these really wonderful conversations they're having with their mentors. I'm like, oh, who's your mentor? And then they're mentioning people from March, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. You're just completely on it, and I really appreciate that you've put so much effort into supporting each other and devs outside of your cohort as well. So thanks so much. I could probably spend several more hours going on about how wonderful your cohort's been to work with, but I'll wrap it up because I'm going to need to get cut off at some point. And yeah, it's just been really great working with you. I'll still be working with you after this, so I'm super looking forward to seeing everything that you do after today. This is definitely just the beginning. Thank you, and just well done. I hope you're all really proud of yourselves. You've done some amazing things, and get some well-needed rest this weekend. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you very shortly. That's all from me today. I'm going to hand back over to Haley to start our Q&A. Thank you everybody for listening and for tuning in. March cohort, I will see you shortly after this Q&A, and yeah, over to you, Haley. Thanks a lot.
Cool, thanks so much, Owen, and well done to March cohort. It's always amazes me the projects that they do, and we say it's kind of the last 2 weeks of the course, but really it's ends up being more like kind of 9 or 10 days. So yeah, it's really impressive to see what's come out of it. So yay, well done. Cool. So for those of you who are still on the call, thank you for staying with us. I'm Hayley, I'm part of the Makers team, and we're going to use this like next section to answer any of your questions if you're thinking of studying with Makers. So there'll be myself answering questions. Owen is on the call who can answer a little bit more about the coaching side of things. And we should be joined by Rachel, who is part of the admissions team, and she can obviously help answer questions about how to apply, what we look for, all of that kind of thing. She's actually finishing off an interview at the moment, so hopefully she'll be joining us in just a little bit. So thank you for the people who have submitted questions so far. So I'll start working through those now. And if you see a question that's the same as the one that you wanted to ask, you can just click the little like thumbs up feature and it will upvote it to the top. So so we get the kind of most wanted answers first, which I can see someone has just done. Cool. So the first question that we have is asking, what level of coding experience do these groups have before starting the course? Okay, so I guess I can answer that one. And Owen, it would be great to kind of hear what you think as well. But in terms of the level that we ask for people to have to join Makers, like everyone are truly beginners. Like we advise that people do a little bit of self-study before joining the course. So that just means as much as kind of trying Code Academy or Code Wars. We advise that people complete the Learn Ruby course on both of those resources. And you know, any similar ones are great as well. I know there's a course on Udemy that some people try, and a couple of other resources. So aside from those kind of bits and pieces online and maybe attending a few meetups, everyone who goes through Makers tends to be you know, new developers. They're people who are changing career, so they've come from, in the most part, from completely non-technical roles, and then, you know, like learn everything that they know during the course. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that at all, Owen?
Yeah, you definitely summed it up. Yeah, so very little. To be honest, I think, yeah, but there's so many places like Code Wars and stuff online you can try out coding. I think the most important thing is to just do enough so that you know you enjoy it. If you enjoy it and if you're passionate about it, that it's kind of like the bulk of what you need. So for our 4 weeks of pre-course before you start the full-time course, you kind of work on building up like procedural Ruby. So you just get comfortable with the syntax and problem solving and things like that. And like you get introduced to pair work and stuff like that. So yeah, before it's like little to no experience needed.
Cool, thank you. Cool, so we've got the next question is about, what we got? Hiring partners. So how many hiring partners are still recruiting? Yeah, that's obviously an important question for, I'm sure, everyone watching. We've definitely had a slowdown in hiring. I think it's fair to say that it's been similar across industries. I don't have an exact number because obviously, you know, once people hire for a role, then their role is filled, so they might, you know, pop in and out like if they need someone else. We had 2 people hired today, but yeah, I mean, in general, naturally there has been a slowdown. I guess one thing to consider is if you're thinking of applying for the course for like the next cohort or the cohort after that, by the time you'll graduate, it'll be kind of 4 months on from now, or even 5. So hopefully the job market will be looking a little bit different by then. But yeah, the honest answer is there has definitely been a slowdown in hiring, but it is still happening. Cool. So the next one we have is about financing the course. So do we have a financing option, or is there a tech-based funding scheme at all? Sorry, Owen, these are not the technical ones at the moment, but I'll get to those. So in terms of financing, we don't have an agreed partner at the moment. we did used to work with one group, and I think there's still 1 or 2 resources on the internet referring to that one, but we don't have a recommended partner at the moment. What I would suggest is there's a website called CourseBud, and they work specifically with coding boot camps. So it's kind of like a compare the market type thing, but specifically on financing for courses like ours. So if you go on there and type in a couple of basic details, they'll at least show you which options are out there. So we can't like personally endorse one of them, but it's a good way to, you know, have a look at what your options are. Okay, there was a slightly more technical question that I wanted to ask you, Owen. Oh, here we go. I had a question from Alan. He's saying that both teams talked about the values that they tried to incorporate into their team's like work ethic on the project, the opening and closing meetings and the reviews. And he said it sounds like an essential part of the course. Do you think that is planned for the part-time course, and will it be achievable to the same level? Owen, could you talk a little bit about the part-time course at all, and if that side of things are still going to be included?
Yeah, to be honest, I believe so. A part-time course by us, it's going to eat, breathe, and sleep the exact same values that we have in our 12-week boot camp. So the really wonderful values that they demonstrated in their teams, that's really the things that we push for and look for in every like week of our boot camp. So this comes into like pair work, like individual work, teamwork. These are the kind of values that we push for, like checking in with one another, open and honest communication, because it's a nice thing to do, but also like in teams, it's really important to encourage this environment where people can speak up and say, hey, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I'm not sure where we're going with this feature we're implementing, or I'm not sure what my contribution has been. And just to voice all of those things so that everybody can absolutely get everything out of it that they need to each and every day. And that's what I push for as a coach. When we do a kickoff, so we'll do like our kickoff of learning units at the start of a week, let's say. When we talk about our team projects, I'm pushing for things like communication, like what are your team values? What are you going to agree and advance on when it comes to how you work? And then you get a chance to kind of like experience these agile processes to see how useful is a stand-up? What do we need to do in that? What happens when it's running over time? How can we improve our processes? And then you think about retros and thinking about how often you need them, and you can kind of learn as you go along. So all of that to me is part of what we do. So that would absolutely, I think, be pushed with the same level of zest in the part-time course.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, definitely. Like, I think that's as far as I've understood it as well. It's just making it a little bit more accessible to people who can't commit to full time. But other than that, yeah, it's the same as what we do. Lovely, right? So we've had a question about the application process. So what is the application process, and what is the take-up rate versus the number of applications? Cool, that would have been one for Rachel, I think, but I'll try my best to answer. So the application process has a couple of different steps. So obviously before you apply, we recommend that you do the Code Academy and Code Wars Learn Ruby training. As well as that, once you've done those, and obviously anything additional is also recommended, we'll ask you to fill out your the motivation form, which is like the first page of the application, and also the second page. And what we want to see on that is, one, that you've done the work. So obviously if you've done the resources that we recommend, you need to tell us there, otherwise we won't know. And yeah, just tell us about why you want to career change as well, and also why makers. There's a lot of different coding boot camps out there, and each offer, you know, slightly different things, and might have, like, we all have our own kind of approaches to teaching. So it's great to know. Oh, hi Rachel. It's great to know kind of why you think where the right place for you to learn. So those are the things to include in your application. Rachel, I'll just loop you in. The question that we had is about the application process. I was just talking about the motivation letter. So I'm going to throw you right into the, oh no, we've lost her, never mind. So yeah, so you need to write that, and if we think that all the information that we have on that is enough, then we'll invite you to a pairing session. And that involves doing kind of a technical challenge with one of our admissions teams. So it works the exact same remotely as we do on site. You'll have to solve a little challenge, and they'll kind of assess your ability to solve it. You don't need to be perfect at coding at this stage. It's mainly just to see that you are able to problem solve. You're not put off straight away if something does go wrong. That's totally fine. It's just how you kind of approach the problem. And then if you pass that, then we'll obviously invite you onto the course. And if you fail, that's absolutely fine. A lot of people fail the first time, and the team might give you some suggestions on what to work on, and then you can book in a second pairing session. In terms of take-up rate, I'm not sure what the exact current ratio is for applications versus people who get in. I know it used to be 1 in 10 for the first time around. I think that has kind of changed up a little bit. But if Rachel joins back on in a second, hopefully she'll be able to give you like the actual number. Okay, cool. So how many people are in a cohort is the next question. And how was doing the course online, I guess, versus on site, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of both? Cool. Rach, are you able to hear and everything now? Lovely.
Yes, sorry.
So sorry, I'm gonna throw you into the deep end a little bit. Would you be able to take that question, like how the on-site courses compared to learning online?
Yeah, definitely. Hi everyone, sorry I joined late. I was having problems with my speakers. So yeah, the cohort sizes are no different to our on-site. So we're gonna have maximum 25 people starting on a cohort. So we haven't changed that. With regards to sort of like how it's different from on-site, obviously it is going to be different. There's not going to be that sort of like interaction, face to face with people. But our coaches have done a great job of sort of still simulating how you can sort of have those sort of like personal connections with your cohort. So we're using Zoom, we're using Slack. So we have a Slack channel where you can sort of message the coaches in the mornings if you're sort of like struggling with anything, and also our workshops are being done over Zoom, so you're able to ask questions of coaches during that time, so we feel like you're still getting those connections with coaches. You're still getting that same content with regards to sort of the course itself is just having to be delivered in like a different format. And I think so far, I think Owen could probably add to this, like, I think, the students have been finding it good. They're definitely having to be good at communicating, but those are all good things that you sort of need in sort of this world that is probably going to be going more towards remote more and more. Owen, do you have sort of anything to add about how the students have been sort of finding remote? I don't know if you've already covered that.
Oh yeah, that's great. Thank you, Rachel. To answer, I came back to your question because I want to make sure that I'm answering it as best as I can. Well, there was 11 people in this cohort that just graduated today. And I think doing the course online has been good. There's definitely advantages and disadvantages. So as a coach, I mean, because the structure of every learning unit that we do in every week, it's still the same. We'll run the same workshops. We'll tailor the same workshops the way we tailor them when we were on site, depending on what a cohort needs or asks for. And like we do a lot of, we have a really heavy focus on pairing for knowledge sharing, and that's exactly the same. You spend your afternoons doing pair programming. So an advantage of being Okay, let me start with a disadvantage. So what I found as a coach was most noticeable to me was that there was less opportunity for like really casual knowledge sharing. So when you're on site, you might bump into someone when you're on the way to like the water cooler or to get coffee or something like that, and you might like chat with somebody in another cohort or in your same cohort and kind of like start talking about where you are in the bootcamp, what you're working on. Things like that, and you can kind of get like advice and support that way, like really naturally. So that was something that I felt like these are opportunities that come about less often because we're remote now. So we kind of had to think about how we can address that. And really, it's just this thing of like just addressing the overall isolation of being on lockdown. So just dropping in more like Zoom calls for just a like cute coffee, just like something social, cross cohort, so people can just like pop in, say hi. I found at the start that like remote socials felt a little bit weird, but honestly, we've just all had to adapt, like everybody, like in and outside of Makers, to this new way of socializing and hanging out and stuff. And now it feels really normal. So for me, I think as a coach, if I'm like in a workshop with some people in real life, it's kind of easy to tell by body language sometimes if somebody is feeling a bit unsure or they're feeling a bit worried about what we're working on, and there's less visual cues. So we've kind of found ways to check in with people more, to say like, hey, how are you getting on? How are you feeling this week? We've had to make more of an effort to like really have visibility over every learner so that nobody flies under the radar. So that's one of the kind of things that I've had to change in my coaching style. People have really like enjoyed pairing while we're remote. So we have a really kind of like stringent template on how to pair while you're remote, and it's like steps that you need to take to like make sure you're getting the most out of it. And this is just like really breaks it down, like who's starting the Zoom call, who starts sharing their screen to like work on this code together, how often should you take breaks. There's like different recommendations depending on how you feel about taking breaks and things like that. But people have really liked that time of just being with another developer for the whole afternoon and working on a problem together. So I think it's happened really naturally for the pairing sessions. It's just translated really well. And in the mornings, it's often just like the peer group check-ins. So those are every morning at 9:30. And that's where you kind of come together in a smaller team from your cohort to just talk about what you're going to do that day, how you're feeling. Coaches join those sometimes to check in with you, and then like you can just have kind of a conversation in a smaller forum. And of course, as Rachel mentioned, we have the virtual coach desk every morning. So if you're not in a workshop and you're working on things, you can just pop in and have a Zoom call with a coach to chat about what you're stuck on. And I've noticed like some learners just like post in their cohort channel on Slack to say, hey, I'm working on this thing today. I'm working on like a debugging practical or learning about mocking. Does anybody want to pair up? And people choose to work on things in pairs in the mornings as well. So I think like, yeah, we've adapted, but the main thing is always pushing for like those social interactions, because that's like the foundation of knowledge sharing and just getting everybody on the same page and helping each other out. And it's something we've just had to be like more like careful to highlight.
Cool, thank you both so much for your answers there. So I'm just wasn't ready to speak yet. Cool, we've had a lot more questions come in, so we'll try and get through as many of these as possible. If we don't have time to answer all of your questions today, by the way, I'll write down any that we haven't that we don't have time to answer, and I can post the answers to you in a follow-up. Cool, so we've got a question from Eliana saying, are makers planning to reopen or will we remain remote? Yeah, so for all of the cohorts that are listed on the website at the moment, those are all completely remote, so we won't kind of switch halfway back to on-site. And currently, as a company, we have no plan to return on-site just yet. Obviously, because we're able to deliver the course remotely, and it's been working really well, and we want to keep people safe without jumping the gun. We're not going to, go on site until we're absolutely sure that it is okay to. But I'm sure that once we decide a date that we will go on site, there'll likely be an announcement on our blog and probably our B2C student newsletter. So if you're not registered for that, then I'd advise you sign up, because that's where like most of the updates are. I think maybe 2 people asked that question. Yeah. Cool. Okay, we've got a question about job hunting, which I know that none of us are on the partnerships team, but I might ask Rachel if you can help out with this one. They're asking, do we work with Makers graduates after the course, and what percentage of alumni secure a dev role within 3 months of graduation?
Yeah, definitely. So the first part was, do we work with makers after they graduate? Absolutely. So we've got a careers team that are sort of solely, they're responsible to sort of help you find your first job as a developer. So our careers team, they do workshops from week 6 of the full-time course through to week 10 or through to week 12 when you sort of graduate, putting on workshops to do with sort of anything job related or anything job hunting related. So prepping your CV, practicing for interviews, how you should be using LinkedIn, for example. So the careers team put on amazing sort of workshops about helping you, change your career. So that's one aspect of it. And then obviously when you're finished with the course, they're going to be there to help support you on the job hunt as well. So I guess the main part of job hunting only starts when you've completed the course. So those that are graduating today will start their sort of job hunt next week. They'll be putting out applications to our hiring partners. If we have hiring partners that are hiring, they'll be putting themselves forward for those jobs. So our careers team will support with applications and helping you through the interview process. If we can, but there is sort of work for the maker themselves to do, sort of prepping themselves for the interview. Putting in those hours to sort of get ready for technical tests. There's definitely sort of support there. I think the second question or the second part was to do with sort of like numbers. So our latest reporting we did last year from January to June. So we had 7 cohorts, and that was 164 students going through Makers, and 89% of them are employed with an average salary of £32,748. So yeah, that's the last time we sort of were able to sort of collect data from our makers and find out what they're doing. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Rich. That's really thorough and a good number to know. I wasn't aware of that. So hopefully that's helpful for a lot of people watching. I'm going to scroll to one of the technical ones because it'd be great to hear Owen's views on this. They're asking, why is it that makers teach Ruby and JavaScript?
Thank you for this question. Oh my God, Ruby is so lovely to use. It's just so nice. There's more reasons than that. I just really, really enjoy it. So like my experience as a developer, I started with Java for 4 years and then worked as a Swift developer for 3. So when I joined Makers and I started to learn Ruby, I just thought like, wow, why didn't I know about this at the start? Because it's so, the thing about Ruby is it's really like, it's more easily readable in terms of its closeness to just writing English. So it's just like a nice language to be able to delve into. And the thing about when you're starting to program, the thing that is like the most challenging is just trying to think like a developer and problem solve. And you'll have to think about like how to like kind of come up with solutions to logical challenges. So like the programming language should be the thing that kind of helps you do that rather than hinder you with really like specific technical like bits of syntax and stuff that kind of make things more challenging. It's really widely used. So like websites that are built on Ruby on Rails, which we do a week on in the course, or like Twitter, Shopify, GitHub, Hulu. I just Googled the list. Airbnb, Groupon, Goodreads, Kickstarter. It's really widely used, and it's just quite a nice language to work with. I really enjoy it personally. So we move on to JavaScript then, and it's kind of like a nice segue. We have a learning unit called Learning a New Language. And that week, it's not really about learning JavaScript, but it's like, how do we learn any new programming language after working with one for so long? So the things you think about is like, how do we take what we currently know and come up with a system to kind of translate this so that whenever we have to pick up a new language, we can. And so we do that then through JavaScript. That's what we move on to next. As of, I think still today, JavaScript is the most commonly used programming language. It's completely native to the web. So for web programming, it's just the best. Those are my opinions on why we do both. And yeah, I do believe in them. I think a lot about how I started as a developer and how my path would have been different if I came to Makers. And I do really believe in the languages that we work with here. But I'd really recommend like checking out Ruby if you haven't already, because it's just quite nice to try out.
Thanks, Anne. I think that's really helpful context. I think from speaking to a couple of the other coaches, I know Alice, who's our head of coaching as well, she's a massive fan of it. I think it seems like a really kind of tangible language for beginners, whereas some have all sorts of like squiggles and lines going all over the place. They can be a bit daunting, whereas Ruby seems like quite like a gentle path into coding if you're new. Okay, cool. The next question, I'm actually really glad that it's an anonymous person who's asked it. But I really appreciate you asking this, because it's kind of half feedback, half a question. They said, do we have any more plans for the part-time course? The current planned schedule for part-time is fairly hectic, which for those of you who don't know is 4 evenings a week and weekend hours. For people working full-time and with young families, it can be challenging with bedtimes, etc. I'm actually going to screenshot your question, because I think that's really valuable feedback for us to hear, and I can share that with the team. So yeah, we're running the part-time course as a pilot. It's not something that we've done before, so it's for us as well. It's a little bit of a trial to see if it does work for people. So, knowing those kind of things now will really help us, I guess, build out that course for when we do run it again. At the moment, I'm not aware of another date. As I say, it is a pilot. Rachel, there's nothing else planned at the moment, is there?
I don't think so. I think, like Kaylee said, it's a pilot, so we're trialing sort of the hours, but those are the sort of hours that we think are going to be needed in order to do the course in sort of 7 months, rather than spreading it out over much longer. But we're going to learn a lot of things from doing this part-time pilot, and you never know, in the future maybe there'll be sort of a different version of that which might be more flexible. So I would just say sort of keep your eye out.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple actually here about the part-time course, so I'm going to group those all together while we're kind of on the topic. They've asked, is there anything needed as a prerequisite from the part-time course starting in July? Is there anything different at all, Rachel?
Nothing different. There'll be the same sort of application process as the full-time course. The interview will need some preparation, so the Code Academy Ruby course, and also getting 100 honour points on Code Wars. So yeah, the same requirements, because it's going to be the same course content.
Cool, thank you. I think I saw one more about it. Part-time course. Will you run a second before February? Yeah, again, we're not sure if we're going to run another date just yet, but again, announcements will be on the blog or the newsletter, so please look out for those. So the next question is in relation to the job offer guarantee. They're asking, do we know if the job offer guarantee will return soon? I don't think there's currently any plans for it. The reason that we stopped it is kind of 2 reasons. One, obviously, like the job market is a little bit of a different place, so it's not really fair for us to promise that at the moment when there's a lot of things up in the air. But also a reason for us getting rid of it was, or not getting rid of it, I suppose pausing it, is because currently we've got people applying to the course from kind of all over the country and maybe even internationally in some cases. A lot of the connections that we have are in and around London. So obviously if you're applying from like Mexico or something, we just won't have the same connections there. So I think, again, there'll be an announcement as of when. Kind of feel like a record on repeat here, sorry about that. but yeah, we'll let you know if there are any plans to change that. Cool. So what else have we got here? That's about returning back on site. And the application process for the part-time course, which again is the same. A question from Joel: are there any more spaces for the June cohort?
I guess it will depend, Joel, if you have done any coding before. So obviously we have a pre-course starting on Monday, but if somebody had sort of completed the Ruby prerequisites, you should email in, and perhaps we can do sort of a last minute interview on Monday. So Joel, if you do have coding experience and you have been working through some of the Ruby, there is still a couple of spaces, so we could see if we could get you onto there. Otherwise, we have a pre-course starting on the 6th of July, so that's only just over 4 weeks away. So that would be the next one that most people are going to be aiming for. But do email in if you are very keen for June.
Cool, thanks Rachel. And that's contact@makers.tech. Cool, so the next question I'm going to answer is from Sabiha, who is asking, are there people who drop out of the course? Owen, I guess you'd have the most experience of that.
Yeah, I guess in my experience, it's under very extreme, like extenuating circumstances. So if somebody had some like really challenging personal like circumstances that they just really couldn't continue, that would be an example of somebody having to drop out. It's very rare. If it came to if it came up where somebody was wanting to drop out and we talked about it, and if it was anything to do with like the content of the course or how they felt that they were doing, it's really important for a coach then to be able to figure out what kind of support we need to offer to make sure that you feel like you're able to continue and to thrive. It is an intensive boot camp. Because the things you get through in the 12 weeks and the full 16 weeks, including pre-course, it's immense. Like I can't overstate just how impressive it is, the amount that gets crammed into those 16 weeks. So it can be really overwhelming. And the thing that we need to look for is like keeping an eye out for that overwhelm creeping in. So we have like, I mean, there's a number of ways that these things like can present themselves. I think what I mentioned before about wanting to have visibility over each learner in a cohort, it's really important that we have like check-ins and we see how you're doing. And this kind of comes in a lot of different formats. So there's like really structured ones where we're going to check in with you in like weeks 3, 6, 10, but also like we're checking in with you every day because we're seeing you in workshops and afternoon pairing sessions on the Slack channel every morning. And if we are not really like interacting with you for a couple of days, like 2 days, if I haven't heard from someone, I'm going to be like, how are they getting on? Maybe technically you're doing fine, but you're not really reaching out. I'll probably like want to have a chat with you at that point to see how you're doing. You might be technically struggling. Maybe there's support you need. And then we'll just have a conversation about that. And then if there's another kind of a support a coach can offer, whether that's one-to-one like life coaching with our EI coach, Donna, or technical one-to-one with a technical coach like me or Alice, Tatiana, anyone else. We can just like have a Zoom call, do some pairing, talk about how it's going for you, offer you feedback. There's just kind of like a whole bunch of ways that we're going to like throw our weight under supporting you to make sure that you feel like you can continue. Because I think like imposter syndrome is so real as a developer. A lot of people are often waiting for this day in the distance where they can call themselves developers and like, no, I don't know X, Y, or Z, so I can't call myself a dev. But it's just not the case. Like from the first moment you start writing code, you're a developer. And then it's just about identifying your own learning needs as you go along so you can keep building them up. So yeah, it's not like dropping out of the course from like overwhelm or something like that. It's something that we would really kind of heavily try to mitigate before it ever got to that point. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Owen. I think that was really, really thorough. And for those of you, if you want to kind of know a little bit more about the support that we offer and a bit more about, Owen mentioned our EI coach, Dana, I'll post it. I'll see if I can post it to you in the chat. If not, I can post it as a question, I think. So you guys can have a look at, you know, what that entails basically. Or if I'm unable to figure out how to do that, then I'll add it as a link in the email afterwards. Cool. Okay. So we've got a question. This one's for Rachel, asking, what's the format of the interview itself? So before you joined, I said a little bit about that they're solving a technical challenge. Is there anything that you can kind of elaborate on that?
Yep, I can. So at the start of the pairing session, we'll just generally ask you some questions about why you want to sort of become a developer, like why do you want to come to Makers? So hopefully those shouldn't be hard questions. If you have been sort of researching about coding for a little while, hopefully you do have sort of a passion to want to come and do Makers and change your career. And then the second part of it is doing some small Ruby challenges. So we've created these challenges ourselves. We'll bring up a text editor and we'll share our screen with you over Zoom whilst we're doing the interviews remotely. And we just get you to, we put the instructions for each of the questions down and we just ask you to sort of work through them. We're there to prompt you and help you a little bit. But yeah, we just want you to sort of demonstrate some basic Ruby syntax, how to create a method, for example, is one of the things we'll look at. And during the session, we're not just looking for you to sort of have revised Ruby syntax and to know it off by heart. So it's not like a test of your memory. So don't worry about that. If you've been through the resources that we send out to you, you should be prepared for the interview. And we're looking for other things as well, like communication. Like Owen said, we do lots of pair programming and group work. So being able to talk about your code is like such an important skill. Being able to look at error messages and change your code sort of as needed. Problem solving skills, what is your logic like? How are you approaching that problem? So yeah, don't be worried about memorizing Ruby. We all know that Google exists, and when you're a developer or when you're on the course, you're going to be constantly finding out new information. So we're just looking to see that, yeah, that you've got some of the basic concepts down. So just do the prep that we ask of you, and that should prepare you. And we have different ways that we can help you. So if you are sort of struggling with the prep, please email us, please call us, and we could direct you to some workshops that we have going on and things like that.
Cool, thank you so much, Rachel. Cool, so with our last couple of questions, I think we'll wrap things up at past. So we should have a chance to answer a couple more of these that have just come in. So the next question is asking, what are the thoughts of Makers with regards to the future of remote working, considering the current unusual times? I don't know if this is in the context of like work in general or for us specifically. I guess, I mean, it's kind of more of an opinion. I know that from speaking to a lot of our team, and I don't know what you guys think, but it seems that a lot more companies will have to get used to working remotely, and you know, allowing that to be an option for their staff. I don't know, like is there anything different that you can add to that, Owen or Rachel?
I missed the question and I can't see it on the Q&A.
Oh, sorry. So it's asking what are the thoughts of Makers with regards to the future of remote working, considering the current unusual times?
I think we have seen like lots of different companies sort of saying that they are going to be offering more remote working. I was just sort of reading a blog yesterday about sort of Facebook and how sort of new hires, they're going to be offering more remote working, but that's just something that I was reading. But I definitely think companies are realizing, or it's making them realize, that everybody in some jobs can work from home, and if they can, allowing, you know, their employees to be more flexible. So I think that's great, and it's great to sort of have the ability or the chance to learn remotely, because you're going to then transition to a company better if things do continue in the way that they're looking at the moment, that you're going to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and they've just actually added a note to the chat saying it's in the context of for software developers working remotely instead of being in an office full time, which I think is reasonably related to what you said. I mean, is there anything else from that you would add at all?
I don't think so. I think you hit the nail on the head. Companies have had to learn how to just work with it and to do it efficiently. Companies are still figuring things out as they go along. But I think like even after lockdown, at least then we would have by then the understanding of like there's a lot of advantages to it. And I don't know, I can't see every company going back to just working on site like 5 days a week, or you know, every day in a year. So yeah, I think people have managed to adapt and they've recognized the benefits. Some people prefer it, some people are indifferent to it, and I think yeah, when things are like calmer, it won't go entirely back to the way things were in general in software dev, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think from kind of speaking to some of our students who've done the remote course previously, if you're interested in remote working, we have a post on our blog about a student called Paula Muldoon. She did a remote version of the course, I think back in 2017, and has pretty much always worked remotely since then. So if you want kind of information on how that worked for her, I definitely recommend looking at that blog post. Or even reaching out to her because she's a massive makers advocate. So yeah, have a look at that. It's Paula Muldoon if you're interested in the blog post. Cool, so let's go back to the questions. So I'm looking to start the course later in the year, around November time. Will there be courses starting around that time, and how far in advance should I apply? Rachel, over to you.
So we have a new cohort starting each month, so there'll definitely be one in November, and my mind's gone blank. What was the other part?
How far in
advance? I would say sort of 4 to 6 weeks in advance, but I think if you have like a notice period of 2 or 3 months, then obviously you might want to apply sooner so that you can go through our application process and know that you've passed the interview before sort of handing a notice in. So do apply sooner if that's the case. I would say that we don't like to interview people more than 6 months in advance of when they hope to join us. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, a couple of months before you hope to join us, but you can be coming along to events and working through resources, you know, before that, so that when you do apply, you're even more prepared.
Yeah, I think like there's that delicate balance, isn't there? We try to advise people like you want it to be soon enough so it kind of seems like tangible, but like not too soon that you're going to have to do the whole thing in a rush. And also, I think if you apply like really, really far in advance, like sometimes you can like lose that momentum if you know that you've got in. You know, there's nothing to really keep you to account anymore. So I think, yeah, I think that was definitely a helpful time frame that you gave. So you mentioned events, Rachel, and we have had a question from James asking how often we are planning to do Code Accelerator sessions. So for those of you who don't know about Code Accelerator, it's a coding workshop that we run here at Makers, and we've actually been planning some of the scheduling this week. Currently it's looking like we're going to try to run them around every 2 weeks. The days will move around a little bit. Sometimes it will be on a weeknight evening. It tends to be from like 6 to 8:30. There'll be some weekend sessions, just so we can try to include as many people as possible rather than having it at the same time. Could you like tell us a little bit about what happens in those sessions, Rachel?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, the sessions are really great for anybody wanting to sort of meet one of the coaches. So it's going to be run by one of our technical coaches, and it'll rotate about who does it. And so you'll get to meet different coaches, which is great, especially if you are thinking about applying later in the year. You can meet a few of our coaches beforehand. And what they're going to do is they're going to share their screen with you, and they're going to have a Code Wars kata. So Code Wars is a platform where you can work on different coding challenges, and it can be in lots of languages, but we pick Ruby because that's one of the languages that we use here. So they'll show you their approach to problem solving, breaking down the kata, you know, what Google resources they find useful, how they test their code, basically showing you how they would approach a problem and get to the answer. It's a little bit interactive as well. They might ask you a few questions like, what do you think would happen here? But yeah, it's a really great way to see how somebody else tackles Code Wars, because it can be quite daunting. And then the second part of the session, you're going to be coding with other people that are learners, or like other people learning to code. So we split you into groups, normally pairs, 2s or 3s, and you're going to work on a Code Wars kata together. The coach running the session can sort of like dip into the different rooms and help if needed. So yeah, it's a great way to practice coding and meet people that are also learning to code. But it does require you to have worked through Code Academy, so you've got that basics first. Hopefully you can have some time to sort of practice some Code Wars katas on your own. That would be like the perfect opportunity to then join one of our Code Accelerator workshops. If you're brand new to coding, you might just get a little bit lost. So do spend some time yourself working through Code Academy first, and then you're going to benefit from seeing one of our coaches work through a kata.
Cool, thank you, Rachel. And I noticed at the end of the question there was they were asking when the next date is. We're just confirming which dates work for everyone's schedules, but after it'll be posted at some point next week. The event won't take place at some point next week, sorry, but we'll list the next one at some point next week.
Is the one on Tuesday sold out?
I'm not sure, but they were basically saying that they don't feel entirely prepared yet. But if it is sold out, like, I'm sure we can add a few extra tickets for you people, of course. Cool, so we've got 2 final questions, which should take us to the end of today's session. So thank you all for joining us all the way through to the end. So the first one is about Makers Academy versus Makers Apprenticeships, saying what's the difference between the two, and are there plans for the apprenticeship to be reopened? Thanks. So I can explain the difference, and in terms of dates, maybe Rachel, if you can help me with that. But so Makers Academy is the boot camp. You join us, it's 16 weeks intensive, and then at the end of it we help you to search for a career in the tech industry. The difference with apprenticeships is that the start of it is still a boot camp format, but for 12 weeks. But when you do an apprenticeship, the spaces on the cohort are kind of offered by a company, so you're essentially employed from the start of the apprenticeship, and then after the boot camp you go on and work in the company for the following 8 months, I think it is, to complete the rest of the apprenticeship training, and you get a formal qualification. I think people just sometimes prefer different things. Some would rather just do like a shorter course where you can upskill and go straight into industry, whereas other people prefer to, kind of have maybe a little bit more security, and, like know that they've got a job at the start and also get kind of like ongoing support for the year after. So it just kind of depends which, what sort of person you are. In terms of next apprenticeship cohorts, Rachel, I'm not aware of any. Is there anything at the moment?
No, so the applications are sort of closed at the moment. You can register your interest on the website, so I think that's the best thing to do. Go onto the website, just pop in your email, and then somebody from our apprenticeship admissions can get in touch when perhaps we do have a new cohort that you can interview for. I would say if you've already done that and you're waiting to hear back from us, it's because there aren't any opportunities at the moment, and as soon as there is, we'll be in touch.
Cool, thank you so much. And we have a final question taking us bang on quarter past. How nice. So the last question is about money, which is a very good question, actually. It's asking, you mentioned that a lot of your recruiting partners are London-based. With the London weighting on salaries, what sort of salaries might you expect outside of the capital? It's a tough one, actually. So I think Rachel mentioned earlier, the average salary for graduates, which I think in the main are in London, starting is 32k. I think outside of London, like it's difficult because that's not really where we work much. So, I mean, I personally don't have a lot of context. I think they tend to fall more into the mid to kind of higher 20s, but in all honesty, like I said, because we are London focused, that's kind of where my knowledge lies. I don't know if, Owen, if you've got any experience from the industry itself, or Rachel, if you've seen anything different at all that you could add.
I don't think I can tell because I've come from like Dublin and then London, so I've been like really oriented in both so far. Yeah, so I don't want to even make a guess because I don't want to mislead you.
Yeah, same for me. But if I know that the question was anonymous, but if you did want to sort of email in, I'm sure we could chat with our partnerships team more. Perhaps you are from a certain area and perhaps we have placed a maker there, and then we can give you some better numbers rather than sort of guessing or plucking a number out of the air, because that's sort of unfair. But yeah, if you do want to get in contact at makers.tech. We can try and find out some more information perhaps for you.
Yeah, thanks guys. I think that there's so much variation. Like if you're in like a major city compared to like a little small outlying town, there's going to be a lot of different things. And Lucy says, thank you very much, Rachel, Owen and Hayley. Have a great weekend. You too, Lucy. Cool. This brings us to the end of demo day and our Q&A and yeah, just getting to know some of you all. I know from my perspective, like we always like to meet people who are thinking of joining us. We used to obviously meet people on site, so it's nice that we can still kind of have a bit of a chat with you this way. If any of you have any kind of follow-up questions, obviously we've probably said our email address 2,000 times, but contact@makers.tech. And yeah, have a look at our blog. I really recommend you reading Dana's blog posts. They're fantastic. And some of the student stories as well, because obviously they're the ones who've done it, so they've got the absolute best experience of what it is to study here. So I'm going to let you all escape. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, we will hopefully see you soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.